Hello and welcome to a new tutorial. This is Everything April YouTube channel. Today's tutorial is on how to draft a Victorian corset top. This would be an easy method of drafting a Victorian corset for beginners, and shown on the screen are the measurements I'll be using for today's tutorial. So I've drawn out the first line, which is the shoulder line, and from the shoulder line to 9 inches is the bust point line, to 12 inches is the under bust line, to 15.5 inches is the front half length, and 21 inches as the front full length. So I'm going to make all these points into a straight line. Labeled the lines, the shoulder line as SL, the bust line as BPL, the under bust as UB, the waist line as WL, and the full length as FL. So on the shoulder line, I'm using the 3 inch 8 inches standard for shoulder slope. At the 8 inches point, I came down by 1 inch and connected to the 3 inches point. And then for the front neckline, I'm going to be using a standard neck line of 3 inches depth with by 3 inches with 3 by 3. So that is what I use for the neckline. And also on the shoulder line, I'm going to impute half of my shoulder measurement, which is 7 inches, and from that point I'm going to come down by 8 inches, which is half of my round armhole, and this will be my chest line. I'll also remeasure half of my shoulder measurement on this 8 inches point, and then connect this measurement up to the shoulder slope as shown. I will impute 4 inches, which is half of my bust span measurement, on the bust line, the under bust line, the waist line, and the full length line, and I'm going to connect these points with a straight line. Then on the shoulder slope, I'm going to measure what I have from the neck width down to where the shoulder stops. I would find the midpoint of that, note it on the shoulder slope, and connect that point down to the bust point line to meet the dart at the bust point line. Since this is going to be a tube top, I'm going to determine how low or how high I want the neckline to be. So I'm going to measure 1.5 inches above the chest line. The chest line is 8 inches, so I'm measuring 1.5 inches above that, or from the shoulder line I would measure 6.5 inches downward, and I've ruled across this measurement. On the bust span line I just ruled, I'm going to take that from the waist. I'm taking 3/4 inch on both sides, 0.75 on both sides on the waistline. So the total that there is 2 inches. On the under bust line, I'm going to take 1 inch on both sides. That means I'm taking quarter an inch more what I took from the waist, and I'm connecting the dart from the under bust to the dart on the waistline. Then on the full length, I'm going to take 1/2 inch on both sides of this line, and I'm going to extend the dart from the waistline down to the full length dart. So on the line I ruled above the chest line, I'm going to also take that 3/4 of an inch on both sides of this line. I'm taking 3/4 inch, 0.75 on both sides. So I'm also going to connect this, but before then I'm going to connect the darts from the under bust to the bust point. I'm connecting the dart legs to the to the bust point line, and then the one coming from up, I'm going to also connect that down to the bust point line as shown. So this is the first that I'm shading this, and it will be cut off. Now I'm going to impute my circumference measurement. On the chest line, I'm going to impute quarter of my bust measurement, and I'm going to check the dart that will be cut off at this point, at the chest line point, which is about 0.75 inches, and I would be adding that to the bust measurement. On the waistline, I would impute quarter of the waist measurement, which is 7.25 inches. Waist measurement is 30 inches, but I subtracted 1 inch for waist snatching from my waist measurement, so I have 29 inches. Divided by 4 will give me 7.25 inches, and I would replace the 1.5 inches that I would be cutting from the waist line. So I would have to impute 8.75 inches on the waistline, but I still want to divide the front bodice into more parts, so I'm going to add extra 1.5 inches that allowance to the measurement on the waist. Then on the hip, I'm going to impute quarter of my hip measurement, which is 9.75 inches. I'll also replace the dart that will be cut off from the full length, which is 1 inch. I'll connect the point from the chest line to the waistline and down to the full length. For the front armhole, I would measure what I have from the shoulder slope down to the chest line. That line, I would get the midpoint. From the midpoint, I would come in by half an inch. And then using a French curve, I'm going to connect from that half an inch I came in by up to the shoulder slope and then down to the chest line to form the front armhole curve. So at the center front, I will decide how low or how high I want the neckline to be. So from this line, the upper chest line I ruled, I'm going to come down by 1 inch. That's how low I want the center front neckline to be. And I'm going to use a curve ruler to make a little sweetheart. I want it to have a sweetheart neckline at the center front, so I'm going to connect to the dart leg, and then from the other dart leg towards the armhole area, I'm going to use a curved part of my ruler to connect it towards the armhole, so that this will be the armhole. Then the upper part now can be used as a yoke in case you want to add a yoke to yours. At the side, I'm going to come down from the bust point line by 1.5 inches, and I'm connecting it to the dart at the bust point line, the nipple to nipple measurement point, and I'm shading this point. This is the bust dart, and this makes up for the difference between the front full length and the back full length. So this will be cut off. I've already shaded it in red. Now I'm going to divide. I said I want to divide this front bodice into more parts, so I'm going to measure from the center front 1.5 inches all along the lines I have, and I'm going to connect this point with a straight line. On this newly ruled line, I'm going to take a dart from the waistline. I'm going to take 1/4 inch on both sides of this newly ruled line. Remember, I made provision for extra 1.5 inches dart for this front body. So I'm taking 1/4 inch on both sides, and I'm going to connect from the waist up to the neckline as shown, and then I'm also going to connect from the waist down to the full length. So it means that from the 1.5 inches provision I've made for that, I've taken out a total of ½ inch dart. So I still have 1 inch remaining for the dart allowance I added. From the bust span that I took on the waistline towards the side, from that leg, I'm going to measure 3 inches at the waistline. This is to further divide the side front into two parts. So I'm going to rule a line across this measurement I just took on the waistline. So before I take the dart for this line, I'm going to close up the bust dart. I will close up the bust dart because once I close it up, this line is going to shift. So I'd like to make the adjustments first before I take the darts. So to close the dart, I've cut through the waist dart, the nipple to nipple point dart, and then I'm cutting through the bust that. So I've closed it, I've closed up this point. You can see that the line has shifted. So I would use a masking tape to tape these other parts to close them together. Then I'm going to, through the line, I'm going to blend it back to the line I have up. I'm going to blend the shifted point so I have the same line running from top to bottom. And now I can take the dart. So from my dart I have 1 inch remaining. So on the waist I'm going to take ½ inch on both sides of this newly ruled line, and I'm going to connect towards the armhole part and down towards the full length. So I'm going to also shade this part. This dart will be cut off, as well as the dart I have dividing the center front into two. This will be cut off as well. So at the side as well, you can see that the side seam has also shifted. So to avoid shortage, I'm going to blend this back. The shifted line, I'm going to blend it back to the chest line as shown. So everything now is blended and I won't have shortage after cutting out the pattern. So I will just go ahead and cut out everything now. I've divided this front part as much as I want, but if you still want to divide more, you can go ahead and also draw a straight line to divide it more. So I'll cut this out. I'll also cut out the yoke. For someone who wants to use yoke, you use the upper part for the yoke. Like I said, if you want to use the upper part for you, just cut out the armhole and also the neckline. So for this part now, before I cut out, I'm going to label the center front as CF and the side front as SF to let me know which is which. And I'm also going to further number them 1 to 4 starting from the center front, so that when I cut out, I won't be confused. I'm done cutting out the front pieces and I'm labeling 1, 2, 3, and 4. The 1 is center front and the 4 is side front. So this is it for the front body. So I would go ahead and cut out the back bodies. For the back part, I've ruled out 1.5 inches zipper allowance in case you want to add zipper to yours, and all measurements start from the zipper allowance line. And I also have the shoulder line as I had in front, but for the shoulder slope at the back, I came down by ½ inch, and for the neck line at the back, I have 3 inches by 1.5 inches. So the neckline is 3 inches by 1.5 inches, and these are some of the differences between the front and the back part. So the chest line remains the same. Is from the shoulder to chest line is 8 inches, and shoulder to waistline, back waistline is 14 inches. That is because the that bust that in front takes care of the difference between the front waistline, which is 15.5 inches, and the back waistline, and the back full length is 19.5 inches starting from the shoulder line. Again, the bust that in front makes up for that difference, the difference in length between the front bodies and the back bodies. On the chest line, I'm going to impute quarter of the bust measurement, and for the armhole curve, I'm going to measure between the shoulder slope and the chest line. That line, I'll find the midpoint and then connect to the measurement of the bust on the chest line. That's for the back armhole. Then for the darts, I'm going to use the nipple to nipple measurements like I did in front. Half of that is 4 inches. I'm imputing that on the chest line, the waistline, and the full length line. And I'm going to rule across these points I've made on these lines. Then on the waistline, I'm going to take a dart of ½ inch on both sides. From the chest line, I came down by 1 inch, and I'm connecting from the waistline to this 1 inches I came down by and down to the full length. The dart on the waist, I'll connect it down to the full length as shown. Now, in case you want to use a yoke, you will do the same thing as in front. Measure down from the shoulder line 6.5 inches, or from the chest line, you measure up 1.5 inches and rule across like we did in the front part. So that the upper part will act as a yoke, and also you determine how low you want the neckline or how high you want it at the back. So what I'm going to do now will be from the chest line, I will come down by 1/2 inch. That's how low I want the neckline to be. So in case this thing I'm doing now is in case you want a yoke, you connect from this 1/2 inch down to the measurement at the chest line at the 6.5 point in case you want a yoke. But for this tutorial, I do not want a yoke. So I'm going to connect from the chest line, the armhole, this 8 inches point down to this 1/2 inch using a marker. So you can see this visible line is the one I'm going to use. But if you want to add a yoke, you use the first line I made. On the waistline, I'm going to impute quarter of the waist measurement plus extra 1.5 inches dart allowance. 1 inch is for the dart I've already taken from the waist, and I have an additional 1/2 inch that I made provision for. And on the hip, I imputed quarter of the hip measurement, and I've connected all the points together. Um, then for the at the upper neckline, I'm going to take to tighten the back part, I'm going to take 1/4 inch on both sides of the nipple to nipple line. So you can take up to 1/2 inch, but I'm going to take 1/4 inch on both sides, and I'm connecting it back to the dart on the waistline. So I'm going to shade this part, it will be cut off. Now for I'm going to measure 1/2 inch away from the center back at the waistline, and I'm going to connect that towards the chest line and down towards the full length. This is for that extra 1/2 inch I have remaining after taking out the waist dart. So from that 1/2 inch I came in by, I'm going to remeasure my zipper allowance 1.5 inches towards the zipper allowance, and I'm going to connect up towards the chest line and down as well, like I did the first time. So if I'm to use a zipper, or if you're to use a zipper, you use the first part, and if you're not using a zipper, you cut out from um the inner part. So I'll go ahead and cut out this pattern. The upper part as well can be used as a yoke in case you want to add yoke to yours. So if you're using a zipper, you cut out just this 1/2 inch that that was taken out from the waist. So at the side, I'm going to come up. I want this to be curved at the side part. I came up by 1 inch, and I'm going to connect this towards the center part. I'm going to stop at the nipple to nipple line. So that's how I'm going to also trim that off. So I will be adding zipper to this. I'm trimming off the zipper allowance. Then I'm going to label the center back and the side back. I will label the center back as 1 and the side back as 2. And I'm going to also lace this. So I'm going to reduce the back part by 1.5 inches. I measure 1.5 inches at the top part, at the waist part, and at the full length. And I've connected these points as you can see. So I'll be cutting out 1.5 inches from the center back to make a space for the lacing. So I've labeled the back part, I've labeled center back and side back. I have two pieces for the back part, and I've also indicated the upper part and the lower part so I will not be confused after cutting them into two. So this is what I have for the back. Now for the front part, I'm going to also make the same curve I made at the side back on the side front. I didn't do it before, so I'm going to come up from the hem part by 1 inch, and I've arranged them the same way they're supposed to be, and I'm going to connect towards where the dart for the nipple to nipple was cut out from. So you can see how I connected this. You can do this before cutting the front part into pieces. So but I'm doing it now, it doesn't still matter, it's still the same thing. So I've cut that out, and this is it for the front part. You can see the front part, what I have for the front. So because I closed up the bust dart on front, despite the difference in height between the front and the back, they will all match up. As you can see, I've placed the side back and the side front together, and they are matching up because I closed the bust dart, which is the difference between the two lengths. So this is it, guys, on how to draft this pattern. Thank you for watching, and in my next video I will show you how to make a top with these patterns. Thank you for watching. Please like, share and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.